guys in the air with aircraft coming in, they have less time per shot, per trigger pull, so they have to get more rounds on target.
Bogey, 5 o'clock low.
I'm going to talk about one of the coolest field modifications they did on the Memphis Belle. Rate of fire in a 50 is changed because it's a recoil operated gun. There's no gas system.
Here he comes up.
So Memphis Belle, waist gun position, 2 guys, and these guys are essentially one of the most high risk positions in the plane, and that actually has a lot to do with the attack tactics of the fighter aircraft, and we'll touch on a lot more how that works later on, but statistically these guys are one of the most likely to be hit. But getting into the differences between your earlier B-17s like your E and your F model, and then moving to the upgrades of what the G model had, the first and foremost one that's very obvious is the open window setup.
And it's even different from a D model. D model just has open cuts. These, at least you could close the window.
Okay, so yeah, looking at how it might work, they can actually QD the gun out of the window and shut the window for flight. And these guys are all enlisted men?
Yeah, for the most part, all the gunners were enlisted men.
Okay. And we're going to talk about the guns shortly, but what other features or equipment do we have in this position of the plane that these guys might be responsible for?
So their main responsibility is operating the guns. They really don't have any big responsibilities outside of that. They're here to protect the bomber. They do have their intercom jacks above us.
Yeah.
So they can talk to the rest of the crew, as well as their oxygen stations, so that they can keep their oxygen masks flowing.
Yeah.
They've got, both of them have the heated suit rheostats on either side. This was probably the coldest position, especially when you had the doors open. There's a lot of air that flows in.
Yeah.
So this was one of the coldest spots to be in the entire bomber.
So looking at this guy's position, anyone who's operated any form of equipment knows leads of any kind can get in the way, but he's got to move from here all the way over there. He's got a lead running up here to oxygen. He's got another lead running up here out of his helmet to the communications, and then he's got another lead running down there. I couldn't help but imagine that's going to get tangled and get caught up and get in the way.
I'm sure it did.
I can't help but wonder if there's any examples of guys doing what they wanted to do to alleviate some of that by perhaps moving the equipment. Yeah, trying to actually, it's one thing to look at all this stuff, but trying to put yourself in that guy's shoes, and even just like standing behind this gun and this isn't a reproduction. This guy here was shooting at Nazi fighters. This guy here, like, yeah, it's quite a thing to be standing here.
Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah. That very large, obvious Boeing B-17 tail, looking at it from the outside, it's got such a long rib, but we're essentially right above the ball turret, and you can see the cavity where that tail begins, and we're still 30 or 40 feet from the main tail fin. Yeah.
So a lot of their the tail gunner's oxygen line and his wiring runs all the way back through there.
Wow. Oh, through the cavity above the tail.
Yeah. His oxygen line might be this one, I believe.
Yeah.
That's the tail gunner's oxygen supply.
Okay.
This, I believe, just runs to the waist gunner's oxygen. But his all of his radio and his heated seat rheostat also run back there.
So their bottles for these guys, are those the bottles we saw under the top turret?
Yeah, the big yellow bottles. They also would have a portable bottle that they could move around the aircraft if they needed to.
Okay.
So they could unplug their mask from those and plug it into a portable bottle and move around.
All right. And then this is the first B-17 I've ever been in that you can see they actually do have armored plate mounted right there. So that's really cool to actually see that. Mm-hmm. Biggest thing about B-17 upgrades, in particular with the waist, is there's an issue here. So without crew members even in their position, you look at how much room is in between both those guns. There's not a foot or barely a foot right here. Now, if you can put yourself in their shoes, and we're going to demonstrate this shortly, if we have essentially two opposing targets and we need to cross over from front to rear, it's almost impossible. One of the upgrades they did for the G model was they moved this waist position a lot further this way into this location, because you can see there's quite a bit of space here. And then this position here essentially remained where it is. So let's say we're engaging our targets, and then I get a target indication to traverse towards the front of the plane, and I've got to get past him. So you can imagine trying to achieve that when you got a radio on and you've got 3 or 4 other crew members screaming target indications in your ear, and then I've got to communicate with him as well to get past. So that is definitely an issue. So in the waist now, I'm going to cover the guns. So basically, almost all of your US aircraft of World War II use the AnM2 50 cal. The gun itself is actually different to the standard M2 that everybody knows, the ground variant. One of the biggest differences being weight and then rate of fire. Now, the quickest way to tell all of your aircraft variants of 50 would be, the main one is, upon first glance, you see that barrel shroud. And that barrel shroud essentially serves as a cooling element, because when you look at standard ground mount M2 with the heavy barrel, those guys were number one on the ground, and then number two, they had the ability to carry heavier equipment. So therefore you made a thicker barrel that would last a longer burst without heating up. Now these guys had the ambient airspeed slipping through or slipping past the barrel, but what that jacket does is it serves to actually catch wind and then circulate wind inside the cooling jacket and keep that barrel cool, because that barrel is much lighter than the heavy barrel version. And then moving rearward of the gun, the weight of the barrel actually affects your rate of fire. So rate of fire in a 50 is changed because it's a recoil operated gun, there's no gas system. By lightening parts and then changing your buffer spring, recoil spring settings, it actually allows the gun to cycle faster. So that is the key difference between an air version and a ground version. But the AnM2, with that higher rate of fire, you got to think as well, if you picture yourself on the ground in an infantry role, you're able to take the time to actually zero in on that target, watch where trace is falling, and move in onto the target. These guys in the air with aircraft coming in, they have less time per shot, per trigger pull, so they have to get more rounds on target quicker. The AnM2 actually means Army Navy M2 as opposed to the standard M2. Made by a whole lot of different companies out there. We're looking at some of the 50s here in Memphis, Belle. So for the gun nuts out there who really want to know, the two waist guns that sit currently in the Memphis Belle, this AnM2 is a Kelsey Hayes wheel company, and then the one on this side is a General Motors company 50. So I find it fascinating that during wartime the same gun was subbed out to so many different manufacturers, just like a lot of other equipment. And when you see, for example, a wheel company manufacturing this, to me, I find that quite incredible. So it would be quite a thing to be in a German airplane strafing a bomber and know that a wheel manufacturing company has manufactured a firearm that's shooting at you. Now is a really good time to demonstrate one of the major field modifications done to the Memphis Belle, and that would be our ammunition feed system. But first and foremost, in particular to the F model B-17s, the waist gun positions, as you can see, are directly opposite each other. So that created a problem when in the heat of combat, there's a lot of radio chatter, a lot of target indications coming in and out, not via the radio itself, but the plane had intercom to where all the crew could talk to each other openly. If these guys, for example, he's engaging a target to the rear, he's engaging a target to the front, and then a new target indication comes in where he needs to switch, you can see there's not but a foot or so of room in between the guns. So they actually have difficulty squeezing past each other. So one of the fixes they did on the G model was they actually offset the windows of the waist gun. So when you look in a G model B-17, you'll see this window is completely shifted another 5 or 6 foot that way, and that allowed the gunners to free pass in their station without actually bumping into each other. So that's a really good example of the F model and that problem that they faced and why they offset the waist gun windows. You can also see at the waist gunner station all the armor plating that's been added to help protect the gunners against flak and small arms. And at first guess, these plates would do something to help prevent a lot of the smaller caliber weapons, but once that 20 mil or some of that armor piercing 50 would rip right through these. They're only a little bit above a 1/4 inch thick plate. Getting onto the Memphis Belle's field modifications, the plane was issued with these single ammo cans here. Each one of these would carry 50 rounds, which is not a lot, and for a high rate of fire gun, 50 rounds isn't going to be much. And then the time it takes to do your reload drill. So if you can imagine being this guy engaging the enemy coming in quick, and you've got not but a 50 round burst, it's kind of tough. And it's not like the technology didn't exist, because top turret, bolt turret, tail turret all have big ammo feed systems that provide several hundred rounds. But it didn't really happen for the waist. So if this guy's at his position engaging the target and he runs out of ammo, he has to actually reach down here, grab the can, and all of these cans are just a QD clip system. Rip that can off and then it would clip onto the side. The beauty about a 50 is you can configure it to be left-hand feed or right-hand feed. Given that the cans are on this side, I would imagine the operator would configure the gun to feed from the side closest to the cans. Now, I'm going to talk about one of the coolest field modifications they did on the Memphis Belle. So, here we are at the back of the waist guns. These here are feed system boxes from another B-17 tail gun position. And the reason in the turrets they didn't use that can is because they can't reach them. The guns are hard up against the edge of the turret. Even loading it manually through a feed chute is difficult, because most of the time you can't even get the feed cover up high enough to get in there. So hand loading weapons in the turrets is difficult. So to alleviate that constant single can changing, the turrets were equipped with a large capacity ammo can, and then you can actually parallel link these and have, if you needed to or you were authorized to, have several of these banked up and feed into the next. Now the Memphis Belle modification, these guys obviously saw the issue of that ammunition changing system, so they went to another B-17, perhaps a crashed one or one they could pull parts from, and took the 2 tail gun feed systems, and then they crudely welded this steel bracket in position here to keep them up level with the gun. Another reason why your feed system has to be as close to the gun as possible is the longer a belt actually has to travel, the harder the feed paws are working to pull the belt into the gun. If you were to sit these all the way down on the ground and that gun's fighting to pull that belt up even 2 or 3 feet, it would work, but it would put a lot of strain on the belt and increase your chance of stoppage. So by raising the feed system and then moving it as close to the gun as possible without hindering his ability to traverse forward, he's now got a feed chute, direct feed into that gun. So these guys were able to use their initiative and basically do what they needed to do to increase their chances of survivability. So a really cool example of guys in field without authorization, without approval, doing whatever they wanted to do to get the job done. And the guys we talked about, the Memphis Belle, because this is so crudely welded and cut, it's definitely scrap steel of some kind. They were unsure that this was even in the Memphis Belle. And it wasn't until one of the staff during the restoration saw really good clean footage from the William Wyler film of this in the film, and that basically answered the question of the debate they had as to whether or not these were actually installed in the aircraft. So it wasn't a hillbilly post-war fix or some kind of war bonds to a mount. This was done in theater specifically for the gun system. So one of the best examples in one of the most important aircraft of soldiers or airmen doing what they needed to do to survive. A study was done from November 1942 till December 1943 that studied specifically heavy bombers above Europe for the Army Air Forces, and the study was done for medical support and with the goal to consider the crew members in the plane most susceptible to both injury from ground, flak, and fighter interceptor aircraft. And the goal of the study was done to look at which places in the plane would be best suited to add additional armor to protect the crews. Once the study was done, it outlined the most susceptible to injury and death positions within the aircraft. Of the study done with 1,293 incidences of wounds or death, both waist gunners came in at 127 incidences, both at 10% of the percentage total, so around about in the middle of the susceptibility range of the most dangerous position in the aircraft.